remember what this one's about.
Heck yeah.
I'll have you know, Prim Prim asked, and I had to think about it. But then I was like, wait, no, I remember.
You got the pre-thinking done.
Yeah, like I was asked a question. I was like, fuck, how am I supposed to? Oh, wait, no, I do remember this time. Just confused mouse hours. It's fine.
Just vibing.
Just vibing. That's all I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a great time. It's okay.
I'm having a pretty grand time.
Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Starbright podcast. I believe this is episode 18, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
mathing hard
Nice.
today, but yes, it is 18.
Nice. We're doing it. We're doing it.
And for once, I actually remembered what this episode is about before we started. It's great.
For once. Probably once
Yeah,
and
for
only.
once. Look, I will legitimately suggest the episode and then forget entirely that I suggested it. And that's generally how things go.
Yeah, that's all right though. That's okay. We all have our flaws.
I show
But,
up and just have a great time anyway. It's fine.
Yeah, and today's episode is kink and media, essentially representations of it, how it's been portrayed, and different things about that. I mean,
How
I
it
can't.
impacts how people come into kink and what they believe about kink in advance.
Oh, in a major way, and
I think it also really feeds the biases and misconceptions.
well, yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember if we had settled on a general definition of kink in that first episode. I can't. It's been so long since we talked about it, but I guess we should probably start with like, how would you define anything outside of the standard norm vanilla experience, right? You might
Yes, but I
define.
also think that we have to remember that kink isn't just the proclivities that, you enjoy in sex, because it also, I don't think we should call anything kink that doesn't actually conform to the standards of consent. Like, if it is not consensual, I don't think we can actually call it kink. So I think it's an important caveat to add. Like, it's not kinky if it's not consensual. Other than that, it's just abuse.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, everything
Mhm.
else that goes into, the standard kink regulations applies.
Yes. I don't think we actually specifically said that in the first episode. And I did want to make sure we said that previously, because some people are like, oh, well, my kink is not having a safe word. My argument is, well, then it's not a kink. That's kind of abuse there, buddy. Like, you can't really have a kink without consent.
Yep. It's a big part of the experience.
Yeah. If you are not able to consent or withdraw consent, you are not actually engaging in kink.
Which I would, which is actually a good way to define it. And then I would also then, move that into like, then a lot of the things that people think are representations of kink in media are not really representations of kink in media. 50 Shades of Grey is a very common thing to bring up in this types of conversation, because that is, if you that book 50 Shades of Grey is not a good representation of, in like a lot of ways.
No,
There's a lot of bad books for
there really are.
that.
A lot of the kinky books that are out there that people think of being like extremely kinky are not written by anyone who has ever actually done any deep dives into BDSM, kink, how kink should be done. Like, this is being written by people who have like this vague idea of wanting to spice it up in the bedroom, and that's their idea of what kink should look like, and it's not actually how it works or how it should work.
Yep. So I mean, it's a good argument. It's the same thing in porn too, right? That's popular media.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of it is just unrealistic as to like how any of that functions.
Not even just unrealistic. Sometimes they just use buzzwords that sound hot or things that people know are sexual in nature without actually using that kink or that behavior the way that it's actually used IRL. In porn, like, free use is one of the funniest things I make fun of for porn. Free use porn is not what free use is like at all. Like, even remotely. There's nothing free use about free use porn. But that's what the whole trope in free use porn is it's just like somebody ignoring their partner having sex with them, as if that's what free use looks like IRL. And I have very, very seldom met anyone who would be okay with their partner ignoring them fucking them.
Though I think that's a kink in and of itself. I don't know what that
It
one's called,
is,
but
but
that
it
is a
It is.
free use.
no, that's not free.
Yeah. I think it's a type of humiliation, but that's a different story altogether because it's not free use. Like if somebody wanted to be in a free use dynamic, what wouldn't fly is them being ignored by their partner. Because the whole thing is not meant to be ignored. Free use is meant to be it's meant to be invasive. It's meant to be sudden. It's meant to be a form of CNC. So it doesn't really play well into the, oh, I'm not noticing my boyfriend fucking me while I'm playing video games.
Yep.
It's just very odd to see it portrayed that way because free use, when we're talking about free use, that is not what is meant in kink or BDSM.
And in some of those, it feels more like a role play kink than just free use either.
Well, free use is very often role play esque anyway, but free use is it's a subset of CNC, and I think Will and I have disagreed with this before, but I think there's a lot of things that are subsets of CNC that we don't really think about. But I would argue very strongly free use is just a subset of CNC, and there are different ways to engage in free use, such as somnophilia and like actual like full blown CNC free use, which is very much so like a sudden rape role play that you've given prior consent to that this can happen. But there's different ways to do it, and one thing that I've never actually seen talked about within like a free use specific dynamic is this whole thing of like, oh yeah, you can use me and I'll pretend that you're not there. But I don't really see that anywhere except for in porn specifically. But a lot of times you can tell when somebody has only ever heard of free use in porn because that's what they believe it is. They don't think it'd be something they're into because it sounds boring to them. But then they just start to learn what it is, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I mean, you really shouldn't let porn color what you think kinks are, because generally speaking, they just use the buzzwords without any thought about what the actual kink looks like.
And that's common in just a lot of porn and a lot of media, right? People,
That
I
is
mean,
very,
that's basically what we've said, right? It's people that
yeah.
don't actually know, so they just come up with an imagination of every single little thing of what it would be in their heads, no matter how wrong it is, and then you end
Yeah.
up with 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah. Like I specifically have this whole thing against free use porn specifically because I went on a deep dive like a while back because I was looking for content, not content, but like discussion on free use specifically with the overlap of CNC, because I didn't see a whole lot of discussions on that specific topic, which if you look at like how people talk about it online in these communities, you would think it's a much more common kink, but nobody actually discusses it on places like Reddit and things like that I could find it. I was on this little mission to see if I could find like a subreddit that specifically discussed CNC and free use in the way that I usually see it discussed. And I couldn't find it anywhere. But what I did find was a bunch of free use communities that seemed to have no fucking clue what free use was. And I thought that was really interesting because, like, most of my contact with what free use looks like is very, very heavily colored by BDSM, because that's where I'm going to encounter it. That's where I'm going to discuss it. That's who I'm discussing it with. So when somebody who hasn't been in the BDSM community a lot thinks about free use, it's almost always under the porn category. And I just couldn't find any real representation or discussion on free use from a BDSM standpoint, which I thought was incredibly interesting. How is it not actually being discussed even in our corners of the internet? Like, I think that's also problematic because, like, if we aren't teaching people what free use should look like and could look like under BDSM and consent framework, we're kind of doing a disservice to other people who are trying to get into it.
Yeah, and that's actually quite common, right? Because people
Yeah.
come into sexual awakenings imagining it's going to be like the things that they've been taught in porn, and it's wildly not like that whatsoever. In fact, you do
Yeah.
the things that are pictured in a lot of porn, you'd be assaulting someone.
Yeah,
But
and
they're not taught consent. That's
exactly. And that was kind of what I was on a deep dive about. Is I was just curious because, like, my understanding of free use is that is part of CNC, and that it is very CNC coded oftentimes within BDSM. If we're talking about free use within BDSM, oftentimes it is things that it would be considered rape in any other scenario, like somnophilia. A CNC role play where you've predetermined that you both have like a home invasion kink, and your partner knows that this is going to happen eventually, but doesn't give you a heads up. And they plan this whole thing and they do it with you having prior consented, but it very much so has the feel of a rape role play. Like that's the whole thing. And that's kind of like the understanding I think a lot of people in the community, in our community, have of what CNC and free use role plays can look like. Like anytime, anywhere, it does not necessarily have to be gentle, and you certainly are not going to be able to ignore your partner. So I was looking because I was just curious as to why I couldn't find anyone actively talking about this, like how it works and like how they do it. But what I was finding was a lot of misinformation that seems to be predicated on this type of free use that is brought up in porn, which is part of the reason I wanted to actually talk about this particular kink and media topic. Is I just keep seeing things that are worrisome to me because we are not correcting them when we see them. Not saying that we have to, like, as soon as you see it, correct it, but I think that there is a disservice being done to our community if we are not sticking up and going, hey, so I want to be very clear that this is not actually what free use looks like. I'm glad you enjoy the porn version of it, but if you're trying to get into like a BDSM dynamic, if your partner's already into BDSM, they're going to look at you like you're a little weird if you suggest this, because they're not going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a really important part why, anyone getting into the scene needs to really compare and contrast a lot of different research to find out, what could be, so that you actually have some expectations, coming into it, and you're not just like going
Also,
hog wild and, doing everything wrong, acting
also
like
make
something in a
sure make sure your partner actually understands the same terminology you do. If your partner says they're into free use and you think they're into like a CNC coded free use and they're actually into like porn free use, you're going to have a very different conversation if you don't conversate about that beforehand. If your partner says I'm into free use and you're like, okay, cool, and that's all you say, you could get slapped with a rape charge. So don't do that. Just actually talk about it and be sure you're on the same page as to what these terms mean. Because if your partner's learned these terminology things from porn or from media, you could be having very different conversations.
Oh yeah. And speaking of, has anyone seen anything that was correct in media? Is there a lot of kink correct fiction or
I
shows or anything porn floating
don't
around?
think
I don't.
so. I did see, I think it was one of the newer American Horror Stories where they were talking about 1980s gay scenes in New York where there was like kink coding for like the handkerchiefs in the back pocket. And I think some of that was somewhat predicated in truth. I'm not sure if it was accurate or not because that's not my scene. But I thought that was interesting because historically, American Horror Story has like, depicted gimp suits and things like that. And we've discussed previously that leather kink really isn't a huge thing in modern kink. And I'm not even sure ever really was a big thing in modern kink outside of the media. Because I've not met a whole lot of people that was like their identifying kink so much as it was centered in other kinks. And just happened to be something that, I enjoy leather in my why am I drinking bondage? I enjoy leather in my like leather masks in my anonymity kink. It really depends on the kink. It's not so much the leather that matters, but even
Right.
American Horror Story did like this whole thing about that gimp suit, and I always thought that was kind of odd because there wasn't really an explanation as to why they specifically had a gimp suit. It'd be kind of a weird first step into like trying to spice up the bedrooms going full gimp suit.
A
Right.
few
But
shows that I do know of, I mean, shows either way will still have some drama to them. They're dramatized for the effect, but Sex
Mhm.
Education was really good. And how they spoke about it mainly because main character's mom is supposed to be a sex therapist is a lot. It's more thought through than some shows
Yeah.
because that's the main thing is they're gonna use kink as kind of this in your face thing for most people that just pick up that show willy-nilly, but it still explains things in a pretty good way. But following a high school student, again, dramatized. Another show on Netflix is called Bonding. Follows a dominatrix trying to get kind of a start and what not to do. That one was pretty good.
Yeah. I haven't seen a whole lot of depictions of kink specifically where kink wasn't just meant to be the butt of a joke.
Where those home DIYers, there's a How to Build a Sex Dungeon on Netflix.
Yeah.
That one's a good one. It's very positive.
Half the people on that show just wanted it for the style and were not actually involved in life at all.
Yeah.
Well, even then, the host, I forget her name, the person doing all the home decor stuff and everything, kind of forces them to try things in an educational format and actually takes them to I know in one episode she takes them to a dungeon and it has actual doms and stuff teach about flogging, not just handing them all of these toys and stuff and being like, all right, time to go type thing.
Yeah. I honestly, a lot of times I see it in media, it's usually presented as, oh, ha, ha, this is our joke. Like we're cracking a joke. And the joke is that some people are into like weird things. And that seems to be mostly how it's presented. And I don't know, it's not necessarily even taboo. Like people seem to think it's funny. And I've always found that kind of odd because like, and also the things that they present as being kink are usually like a dominatrix in full leather or a man with a dog mask. And that's supposed to be funny. It's just really interesting how it's always portrayed. And it's almost always leather coated, which we discussed last week. That is such an archaic boomer thing that isn't really used in modern kink. Like you just don't see it. So when people find out that, oh, you're kinky, they must like assume if all they know about kink is what they've seen in the media, they must assume that you have like some secret leather collection somewhere.
I mean, to be fair, that is how it's portrayed, like a large portion of the time.
Yeah, and that or as a joke. Like, oh, I didn't realize she was into kink and she wanted to peg me. Well, they don't use the peg terminology though. They're just like, oh, she came out with the strap on, haha, that's funny. I think there was a scene in Deadpool where they like kind of insinuated pegging was gonna happen.
Oh,
and it was meant as a joke specifically. And I was kind of surprised by that because like it seemed pretty sex positive up until then. That I was like, well, I mean, did it have to be a joke though? Like, why can't you be into that and not see it as something that's emasculating?
I'm pretty sure he did. He fully did get pegged.
I think so too, but like it was kind of presented as National Women's Day, so it was like an emasculating thing. And I didn't particularly care for that because, you know, being into pegging doesn't make you like less masculine, nor is it something that should be just done because it's National Women's Day. It just felt weird to me the way it was presented. It was like setting up pegging as inherently emasculating when it very much so isn't. I mean, it can be if that's your kink, but I think it's kind of problematic to present it as specifically emasculating without any other context.
Especially given that the male G-spot is for what it is in the ass.
Yeah, like I think it's kind of not great, especially the fact that it was Deadpool and Deadpool was like supposed to be super. I don't know, the whole movie was supposed to be like pretty progressive and like accepting. I just didn't like how that was portrayed specifically. It was great to see it portrayed. Just wasn't a huge fan of how it was portrayed.
Yeah, understandable.
I'm trying to think of like other contexts. Like most of what you see being portrayed of kink is leather, women with strap-ons emasculating men, or I'm trying to think like I think that's pretty much it, though. It's like women who are emasculating men, and oh, was it a Supernatural episode where there was a joke where they got led to a secret like gay BDSM bar, and of course the
I
all
don't
dressed in
remember
leather.
that episode.
I think it was a Supernatural episode where
I mean, it sounds like a Supernatural episode. I'm not gonna lie. I just don't
yeah,
remember that one specifically.
the butt of the joke, in order to get rid of the boys, the Winchesters, they gave them an address to go meet somebody, and it was a BDSM gay bar where a leather daddy was waiting for them.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
And I remember going, I mean, I'm sure that exists, but like it is certainly not like something you can just call ahead for your friend to get.
No. I always remember. Oh my God, was that is fucking Franco and Seth Rogen, that Until the End of the World, that apocalypse one. I can't remember the name of that movie, but the Channing Tatum in the gimp suit in that movie. I always think of that.
Yeah, like gimp suits are seen as like something that just happens in kink, and we don't discuss like they are extraordinarily expensive and like virtually never actually seen.
No, it's the leather version of a fursuit.
Yeah, like you just don't see them very much. They're extremely expensive. So like why are they the butt of all of these BDSM jokes? Like, and nobody ever actually explains what it is. Just like, oh, ha ha, leather. This must be kink.
Nope, that's because that's just what everyone's expectations of it is. They
Yeah,
already think
and
that it's all just leather and gimp suits and stuff like that, and that they don't even blink an eye when they see that.
also, leather and just general harnesses. Like now, it's just like the fashion. Everyone wears these harnesses, and most of these harnesses would never have any actual function within BDSM. Like you could not actually be restrained by them in any way.
No. It's style. It's just style now.
Yeah,
Well,
and
not completely, but for a lot of people.
yes, like it was just like an e-girl thing that everyone did, 5 years ago. Now it's trickled down into like mass production for like Forever 21.
Yep.
Like everyone's got random harnesses now, and they have no idea what they would be used for, if they could be used for anything at all. And the reality is the ones that are sold absolutely probably have no use whatsoever.
Yep.
But if you tried to use them, you would probably end up getting yourself or your partner hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
But
mind
again,
the style, but it is
yeah,
not a realistic
I've got
depiction.
nothing wrong
No.
with the style, but like my concern is like if people are assuming because of things that are leather, they must be kinky. I would really hope that nobody would try to misuse those if they happen to see them misused in a media source.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Oh yeah.
all the guys misusing their penis from watching porn, thinking that's how they need to fuck someone. That's evidence right there. That happens all the time.
Oh yeah. What did I see? Another media. It was something where a guy met a girl who was into kink, and like she wasn't submissive though. She had to be a dominant, because a lot of the women that are portrayed in kink in the media are not submissive. They're actually the dominants, because that scene is like, oh, that's weird. Like women aren't supposed to be dominant. So like when you have like an extremely ballsy, scary woman, she must be the dominant. And therefore that's what makes her weird. I've always found that interesting too. Like dominant women are seen as like what kink is. Like, yeah, there's definitely leather daddies, but also scary dominatrixes. And that seems to be like the spectrum that is presented.
Well, I think part of it is also that's like probably two of the more tasteful and then immediately like understood things that you could represent, even though that's being represented wrongly. Like it's just instantly recognizable, because that's just what the expectation has been for so long. So
yeah, nobody wants to talk about like how much of the scene is just like randoms calling you by honorifics in DMs with no.
I can't remember. I can't remember what show it was, but there was a show sometime in the last few years that had a lot of like hidden swinger things for a set of characters that were on the show. Like their house would have like the upside down pineapple and whatnot on the porch and whatnot, and it was never the butt of a joke. Like they never haha laughed at it. It was just like a little known fact that if you paid attention, this couple on the show are swingers. But And that's what it would, because that's what it would be like if you knew some swingers in real life. There'd be little
Yeah.
hints, but they're just normal people. They're still going
Yeah,
about their
they're
normal life.
certainly not going to bring it up to you unless like they know that you're into it, because like why would they make it weird?
Exactly.
I also think a lot of people think that people who are into kink can't help but tell you that they're into kink, when in fact you probably have no fucking idea that the person you know is into kink,
Yep. I
unless like
mean,
you have been with them sexually. Like
we we talked about, little secret, messages, hidden things, I think, in an earlier episode, about
yeah,
how, signaling
spot the day
things like
caller.
day call. Yeah, I was about to mention day callers. Yeah, so that's like a big thing now,
That's like
secretly.
a universal game that like
Yeah,
a lot of people in the lifestyle play,
addicted
like
people.
spot the day caller, because you can often tell that it is definitely a day caller.
And that I've seen that in media as well, and it's just a lot of the time those littler ones that aren't as well known, if you aren't into the scene, they're
Mhm.
in there very realistically because they're not mentioned, but
So
I think they don't point it out
one of the
explicitly
things
because people don't know about.
one of the things I see a lot is day collars that are now being used as like trendy necklaces, and I don't think a lot of people realize that what they're wearing is meant to be a day collar. Or somebody thought the style was cool and they made it for like mass market, not realizing that it was actually supposed to be a day collar.
Well, some of those fancy ones, are close enough where you could just get away with calling them a necklace and not know.
Mhm.
Yeah, like some of the necklaces, like the O-ring necklaces that a lot of people wear now because they think they're fashionable, they're very, very much so meant to be collars. Like it's very obvious if you know anything about the scene. Like if you see a girl walking around with an O-ring necklace, it's probably meant to be a collar or a day collar. But then you'll see a
Yep.
girl who clearly has no idea what it is, and she just bought it at like, I don't know, Rue 21 or something, having no idea what it was because it's just a thing that people think is now fashionable. When in fact they're just literally wearing something that is used to insinuate or to indicate that you're either into kink or have a partner, a daddy. Self collarings are things, so you can't always assume that the person wearing a day
Yeah.
collar is actually with a partner. But you know, this is something that within BDSM, like we've always used as a way to like recognize each other. But now with media, especially Twitch streamers and girls who are on OF wearing these things daily, not necessarily explaining what they are, people think that they're just fashionable. Like, if you're not
They
going to
are.
explain what you are, I mean, they're fashionable, but like
I
also
don't.
we're
Yeah.
biased because we're into kink and we think that that's hot.
Yeah, and well, I don't blame anyone for not knowing. I mean, style is what it is. Kink has become a lot more
I would also caution
visible over the last 20
that
years.
if you are a public figure at all and you are wearing something that is very BDSM coded and you're not telling people what it is, somebody might try to wear it because they think it's just cool and not realize that it is very, very much so meant to be a I am into kink and I want to be collared. So I have collared or I've collared myself
Yeah.
for XYZ reason, or this is meant to indicate that I'm into pet play and I'm daddy's pet. And if
Well,
you don't
that's
explain that, that could be something that somebody gets into some really uncomfortable conversations about later.
well, that's exactly what happens because I mean that's one thing about kink becoming so more openly visible is that you'll get public figures now. Oh, I can openly wear this, but then of course they're not going around saying like, oh, this is what this is. Kids, don't look at this. Don't pay attention to this. Don't wear this. It's just
Yes,
quietly there, and then people grow up or they just copy it, not knowing, and that's
yes,
exactly what happens. That's probably a
exactly.
large part of how body harnesses and day collars have become more of a fashion trend. Finally, an influencer finally decides, hey, I can wear this, and boom, all of a sudden, everyone is.
Yeah. And I kind of have concerns about that because that could like really open up people to some harmful interactions that I would really not like to see happen. But also when I have my page, so when I'm like talking about something and anyone asks a question, I will make a separate post explaining what that is. If I make a reference to something that I assumed was like a well-known thing in kink and somebody genuinely doesn't know, I try to do it, explain it. Cause like just because I get it, just because I assume most of my followers forget it, doesn't mean that the person following me isn't new to kink and just wouldn't get this. Even though it's something that within our lifestyle we assume is a given, doesn't mean you can assume that everyone understands it. And like I think I've even had people going or ask me why I was joking about spot the day caller. Because if you're not in the lifestyle, you may not know what that is and why it's a game. Like day callers can be really hard to tell sometimes. So I have it as a fun little game. Like is that or is that not a day collar? I think it's a day collar. It looks a lot like a day collar. It's got that little hoop to it.
No,
That's a day
I've
collar,
played that
right?
game before. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun game to play, especially at like cons, because there's a
Hmm.
lot of day collars at cons.
Oh yeah. Though I'd
But
argue cons are the space more for the people that do know what it means, generally speaking.
yeah, like sometimes I'll be like, I live fairly near to some college campuses, and sometimes I'll just go to the college campus. And if I'm bored sitting in the coffee shop, I'll just play a little like private game of spot the day collar. How many people are walking in wearing their day collars today? It's usually a lot, a lot. Whether or not they know it's a day collar or not, it looks like a day collar, and it probably is a day collar, even if they're wearing it for fashion.
Yep.
And college campuses, I see them a lot. And I kind of doubt that everyone I'm seeing on those campuses is necessarily into kink. I'm sure a lot of them are, but I'm sure just as many are wearing it because they saw somebody else wearing it and they thought it was cute,
Yeah, and it's
especially
interesting.
media
It's interesting
portrayals.
to see the evolution of that because, you know, 40 years ago, if anyone knew you were anything but vanilla, you'd be harassed. And now,
Yep.
our culture has gone
Or
like a 360 on that, which 360, a
finding
180 on
out
that.
finding out somebody's into kink means they must be a slut too. And
Right.
that's still something that's portrayed in the media. If you're into kink, you must be a slut and therefore you're easy to sleep with and therefore you're going to sleep with this guy and he's going to get mad if you don't. Cuz like, well, you're a slut, right? No, I'm into kink. Those are not necessarily the same thing. Like whether I am or not a slut is none of your business either. But like I'm certainly not a slut for you. What the fuck, dude? But yeah, people find out you're into kink and they assume. I get DMs all the time like, where can I hook up with you? Why would you
Yeah.
think that was an option, my brother in Christ? Like, who the fuck are you? I'm not gonna hook up with you. Well, you sell, right? Like you sell your body. I'm like, no, I'm into kink. That does not mean I'm a whore. Not
Yep.
to call anyone a whore, but like the insinuation there is that because I'm into kink, I must also be a prostitute of some kind. And I have nothing against sex work. And I, in fact, have, wanted to engage in sex work. I have tax reasons that I can't, I can get into. And I have strong feelings about that. But the reality is the assumption that to be into kink means that you must be into sex work. You must have an OnlyFans. You must put out easily is something that is predicated largely in the media too, because that's how women with kink or who are kinky are portrayed. They're going out to hook up with random doms because the idea of somebody being into kink and like it being monogamous, which a lot of people are, is just outlandish to people who are vanilla.
Yeah. And I argue that's probably the forefront of the fight, to be more progressive about sexual exploration is probably that right there. The whole insinuation, oh, you must be a whore, and
Yeah,
that portrayal is being fought back against. I'd say it's not as I don't think openly thought of as it
I
used to
think
be.
I would argue that that is true in almost everything but kink. Because, yes, women are, less judged for having sexual partners now. However, being into kink is still seen as, oh, you must be a whore. Like, you must be like really easy. Cause, like, obviously, you just want to have all sorts of sex or being hypersexual. Like, you just must want to have sex with all sorts of different people. Like, no, I can be hypersexual and just want to have sex with one person. That does happen. And especially with kink, it seems to be stigmatized in such a way that you have to be a whore to be into it. And I find that very confusing. Like, I feel like maybe that's because the biggest way that kink is portrayed is through porn, and a lot of girls who are into OF, who are openly into kink, they assume that because it's portrayed on OF, therefore girls who are into kink must have OFs. Like that's just an assumption that's made. I mean, I'm speculating here, but like it does seem to be a thing that once I was talking more about being into kink, all of a sudden there were just constant assumptions that I was going to be willing to sleep with anyone who messaged me or
I, th-
would be willing to sex with anyone who messaged me.
I think a large part of the reason why it's looked upon so negatively and blown out so much out of proportion into the that level is where America's coming from. Remember, again, 40 years ago, we were still so puritanical, and we were formed puritanically in this country. That was just the culture. Sexual expression was just that negative. And yeah, we've had like 40 years of progress on it. I mean, there was
Yeah.
the free love period and whatnot, and
But
it's definitely
also,
opening more every year and
even
year. But
still, even still, what was progressive then was not kink. It was not kink that was fought to be about free love. Like, I mean, yes, there were people who were into kink who were trying to, promote kink as part of free love, but it was still seen as taboo to engage in kink at the time. And it was still portrayed in the media as being taboo. Like, oh, yeah, absolutely free love, but like, it's still kind of weird that this guy's letting a woman dominate him, right? Like, that's weird, right? In the media, it just is portrayed as a joke. And we seem to have not gotten to the point where we are normalizing kinky things the same way we are somebody who is vanilla being sexually expressive.
See, I think it's pushing there. I think it's getting there. There's definitely a lot more. Again, it's more openly visible in a lot of other places online. Again,
Yes.
there's still a lot of hidden things in media where stuff like that is just not talked about. But it's definitely working its way there. I mean, I would argue that the whole move to people having openly polyamorous relationships now, and it being thruples and all that kind of thing. That again, when we were brought up, Mouse, like that's not a thing that was
Mhm.
talked about openly. That was not a thing that was all over the place.
Yeah.
That was very hidden if that was
I
happening at all.
actually had a conversation with my brother the other day. They were joking about polyamory. And he was like, yeah, I mean, they're probably one of those people who thinks that, they can have like 5 different boyfriends and girlfriends. And I looked at him like, why is that so weird?
Yeah, what's
And
wrong with that?
he kind of got odd about it, like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, it's not that weird. And he
And
got kind of uncomfortable because he couldn't really explain to me why it was supposed to be so weird. But he'd said it as a joke. And my brother, of course, has no idea what I'm into. And I wasn't going to tell him, but I was just kind of like put him on the spot. Like, why do you think that's so funny, though?
Yep.
Why is that person loving more people than you do cause you issues? Like, why is that so upsetting to you? And he couldn't explain it. But it was something that he felt comfortable enough seeing enough in the media that he thought that it was something funny he could make fun of because he'd
Yep.
seen it made fun of in the media too. So at least there's representation. It's not necessarily doing any favors, but at least there's representation there.
But I'd argue that that's just that was like the next step forward in progressiveness from just everyone expecting everyone to be totally vanilla. Now different types of relationships are very openly talked about and known. And I guess some people don't like to talk about the fact that they're polyamorous. There's still an essence of like kind of in the closetness about it sometimes for some people. But
Yeah, and I think that it's also the same thing I was talking about with kink. Like once you start talking about it, like, oh, you can have multiple partners, that must mean you're open to dating me, right?
yeah, but I mean
Yeah.
those negative associations, that's just still part of our culture that we're pushing back against.
Yeah.
I think it'll
I would
happen.
say that for me, a lot of the reason that I wouldn't actually, like, a lot of the reason I don't actually talk about being bi right off the bat is sometimes like that just means that I get men and women being weird in my DMs. Like, I'm going to have the men being weird in my DMs regardless, but sometimes you get the ladies weird in your DMs too if you come out as being bi publicly on your social media
believe it.
platform. So I just never mentioned that I was bi until I was explicitly asked about it. I just never said anything because it was just like, maybe I'll get a few fewer weirdos in my DMs for the time being. Also, like, I feel like a lot of people do that with being polyamorous too, because like if they don't have multiple partners, why do they need to discuss it with internet strangers?
Yep.
Like, I don't feel any reason that anyone should have to discuss having multiple partners unless it comes up and somebody asks, "Oh, are you polyamorous?"
should.
You seem to be talking about multiple partners.
It's people have this weird thing sometimes where they make things part of their personality, and that's just
It doesn't
for
have
some
to.
reason contentious things like, oh, I'm in a non-vanilla non-monogamous relationship, is that kind of thing where sometimes people like to
Oh,
bring it
specifically
make it part of their
ethical
personality.
where that's all they talk about, and then
Yep.
everyone who is actually in a monogamous relationship is just a shitty person. I see
Yep.
that one a lot.
I think
'Cause,
it's
like,
going through the fads essentially. You see it all the time with like TikTok, Kink Talk becoming a thing. Everybody, it shifts from what's cool, quote unquote, very quickly on. Polyamory is a super cool thing now, so everybody's got to be polyamorous. Now it's thirst talks were fucking they're still big, but especially on just like Kink Talk type thing and book talk mixing.
Yeah, book talk and kink talk makes me nervous because I have a feeling we're going to get a whole new wave of really badly written kinky books that people are going to mistake.
Haunting Adelaide got
I fucking hate that book with an ungodly passion.
It's not kink. It's a rape fiction. That's also, all that Haunting Adelaide is.
To be fair, I am into rape fiction, and that is not even rape fiction. That is just fucking terrible.
It's a lot of concerning shit.
I have actually read part of that book, and let me tell you, that is one of the worst written books I have ever seen in my fucking life. The main character, man, is basically like every seventh grader's like wet dream about what they themselves are. Like, oh, he's not only a super, super duper spy, he's also really good at like hacking. Also, he's really good with guns. And because he was so good with guns, he had to go into the place himself, and he had to actually let the second guy who was like, I guess, okay with computers, do the hacking for him instead. It was the dumbest shit I have ever read in my life. And somehow people actually read it and take it seriously, and I could not understand. But I digress. Also, it's the reason that my name has been forever ruined to me. Because Mouse,
yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, let me tell you, I have had a lot of people like, oh my God, are you named after the Haunting Adeline books? Don't ever talk to me again. We're not friends. Don't fucking talk to me. We are not friends.
Oh
like,
my God.
I already did not identify as Mouse. It was just a name I had that, like, suddenly everyone started calling me Miss Mouse, so I just started answering to it. Now every fucker assumes that it's because of that awful fucking book. And I hate it with a passion.
No, it's
Haunting Adeline is like, as soon as somebody tells me that they really enjoyed Haunting Adeline, I kind of have to like narrow my eyes, like, you're into kink without actually like being into kink. Like, you like the idea of kink.
It was kind of just, it was the train wreck you can't stop watching.
Yes.
That's the only thing that you should get from that book if you are reading that book.
Like reading the original My Immortal Fan.
The one thing I couldn't get past in the first like 10 minutes I was reading that book was how they were talking about how, so like, she's the beautiful girl that wasn't actually that beautiful, but like everyone thought she was beautiful, but she didn't see it, therefore it must not be true. But also there's a ketchup stain on the roof of her car, and I'm thinking, like, why the fuck would you have a ketchup stain on the roof of your car? How fucking inept are you? Jesus fucking Christ, dude! Like, why is this something we're talking about in this fucking book?
Definitely a self-insert as well, because the main character is the famous book author that gets to just buy a fucking mansion.
Yeah, like she inherited a super duper awesome mansion that was, you know, a Victorian mansion, but it was also almost entirely decorated in Art Deco. And like every time they explained it, it was like all black, except for the fact that it wasn't actually all black. But you should know that this mansion was definitely all black.
Yep.
I fucking hated that so much.
But like, that's a complete example of how bad it like a source like TikTok could be. Yes. But there is also a lot of good information. It's just having the knowledge to sort through it and actually research further than just what's being given to you. It's normalized a lot of kinks to the point where people aren't doing that little extra step of what's safe. But
yeah. Also, like, these kinds of books, they introduce kink in a way that sounds hot until you realize that actual kink requires a lot more discussion. You're not just going to have a, like, murderous man who is also, like, every, like, teenage boy's, like, wet dream about what they were going to be when they grow up, show up and just, like, suddenly be your dom with no conversation. Because, no, that's actually just a rapist. That's what that is. Yep. And yeah, I mean, you could totally be into CNC, but like CNC doesn't actually look like that, guys. Like, so the amount of times I've had to actually explain to people why Haunting Adeline does not work in the kink world is way too high. And the fact that this conversation keeps happening because people assume that I'm named myself after Haunting Adeline is just deeply upsetting to me.
That's very interesting.
Like, I was already not identifying as a mouse, but now that like Run Little Mouse is like the big thing from Haunting Adeline, it just, everyone keeps sending me merch from that show or from that book. It's like, oh my God, this is totally for you. Why would it be? Please don't insult me in such a way again. Very depressing.
Like it doesn't even show a primal kink all that well either, because that's supposed to be that theme, the whole "Run Little Mouse" thing. It really did not show a primal kink all that well.
No, and like I will be completely honest, I have not finished the book and I have no intention of it. I got so angry reading like the first
There's a
couple of
second
paragraphs.
one, also not worth it. It's not okay at all.
Which one?
There's a second book.
Oh yeah, like no,
it's not okay at all.
I did not expect it to be good whatsoever, but like it was one of those things that I'm gonna call out my friend. One of my friends from server was like, "Oh yeah, you guys should absolutely read this book." And another server member and I were like, "Yeah, okay, let's just read it aloud to each other, like as a thing. Like we'll just make it a joke. We'll do like a little book club." And we started reading the book, and it just became the biggest fucking joke. Like we were stopping every 30 seconds to go, like, "Why is it so fucking bad? Why is it written like this? Why does anyone think this is good?" Like we were just freaking out about how fucking bad it was. Like I have read some bad smut in my time. That just about takes the cake as the worst smut that I've ever read.
Oof.
Yeah. That should tell you how bad it is. If you haven't read it and you need something to laugh at, like try reading 5 minutes of that book. You'll die.
I've heard a lot about it. Well, I mean, I sat and I read the entirety of My Immortal, so I believe in my opinion.
I've read some and watched some really bad smut.
Yeah, I made her read the first couple chapters a while.
I was a toxic yaoi girl in high school.
Let me put it this way. I was so convinced that Twilight can't be that bad, right? It's really popular. It can't be that bad.
It really is.
It really is. So I read the books thinking to myself, it can't be that bad, right? It was. Like I've tried reading the books and I tried to give it my best shot, and I just committed to it. Like I'm going to finish these books. There has to be something worthwhile in there. There was nothing even remotely salvageable in those books.
Okay, so I feel ashamed. I feel ashamed of this, but I'll admit it. Once, many moons ago, during the summer when I had absolutely nothing better to do and was bored out of my goddamn mind, I may have binged the entire movie series of Twilight.
Yes, I have actually done that recently just to like laugh at Kristen Stewart's face.
And there is one redeeming thing in the movie series, only because that was a change from the books, and that's the twist. That's the vision at the end, where you think everyone's dying.
Oh yeah.
Little scene.
That was really
I did
well
like
done.
that. I liked that part. I will say that I've seen the movies, I've seen the books, and the reason I even read the books is I watched the movies, and I was with a friend watching the movies, and I kept thinking to myself, there has to be something redeeming. This can't be this popular when it's this bad, right?
No, it's that.
So I did not even buy the books. I actually got them online. I found like them online, printed up somewhere. So I just read them online, and I read them very quickly because they're not very well written. They're very, very easy to read books. And I was going through them, and I was just like, this is so fucking bad though. Why is it so fucking bad? And I kept trying, because like I always am a hardcore believer, if you don't like the movies, there's a good chance you'll like the books. Like the books are so much better. And I kept trying to like give it a shot. Like so many people like this. I feel like there has to be some redeeming qualities. I was wrong.
Nope.
I was very wrong. Yeah, it was all bad. Like everything about it was bad. Like my favorite part about the movies is the fact that Kristen Stewart's face barely moves through the whole thing. Like she somehow managed to have like no expressions constantly.
I still don't understand that, because she's actually been good in other movies.
She is a great actress, but that movie was no one's best work.
Nope.
I will say that like somehow even when she smiles in that movie, she kind of just looks constipated, and I feel like that's a really good allegory for like the entire movie.
No, 100%. And that's exactly what she looks like. That's the joke. She just looks like she's about to poop herself like the entire movie.
Yes, like I'm not trying to like insult all the Twihards here. Like I get it. Like you guys like it. It's probably very nostalgia ridden for you guys.
No, it's not. There's better vampire fiction out there.
There is vampire.
Read out the thing.
Yeah, it's. I can't. I tried to. I really did, but like I couldn't at all. I really couldn't. But also, I'm sure we probably like dissed a bunch of people for like liking Haunting Adeline. But please, guys, there's so much better smut out there. So much better. Like just because Book Talk said it was good does not mean it's good. Please. I really just I can't read another book like that and retain my sanity. That was so bad. The fact that the main character really was just like everyone's super secret favorite spy, and he was also a super good hacker, and he was also super good at saving children, even though he absolutely sexualized the child that I was reading about. And I was like, why are we sexualizing a 15-year-old girl? This is so fucking weird. Can you stop? It was terrible.
Yeah.
Like,
But
he was talking all about how gross it was these guys would like sexually traffic these girls, but then he was also like weirdly creepy and sexualizing this girl.
I mean, there's a lot of that in fiction, more than you'd think. Stephen
A
King's It,
lot.
the book version of It has has what's essentially a child orgy in it. If you didn't,
I am unsurprised, honestly.
yeah.
I don't know. I've read a lot of really fucking bad books, but yeah, that was oof. Oof.
Yep.
That's a great way to bring up kink in the media too, is haunting Adeline. The fact that that is so many people's first foray into like really hot BDSM
Oof.
fiction is depressing. I shit you not, I was at a clinical or at an infusion for one of my doctor's appointments, and they were talking about Haunting Adeline, and I was like, that is the worst book I have ever read in my life, and they got offended. My infusion nurse was like, I thought it was really good, and I was like, no. And she's like, well, I mean, if you're not like sold on like actually good writing, it's okay. And I just looked at her like, was that actually words that you said? I
What's the
feel like
point?
if you have to excuse a book in that way in order to read it, like maybe you shouldn't read it.
It's also just straight up romanticizing rape. So
Yeah.
it's pushed past just being a fantasy book, and it being possible CNC. That is just rape in that book, and he even calls himself her rapist, basically.
Which can be hot in a CNC scenario. I will give the caveat, like sometimes when you're doing a CNC scene, you will discuss like actually being the rapist of your partner, which in context, as long as you have prior agreed to it, can be very hot. But this is something that you do have to very carefully discuss and make sure everyone's on board with, because CNC is not a light thing to engage in just because you read about it in a book. Like, stop getting into CNC just because you read Haunting Adeline. I guarantee that is not what CNC is.
They don't know each other. He literally breaks into her house.
Which, again, there are home invasion.
And that's
things.
it.
Again, this is something you have to be very, very solid in your partnership with your dom or your sub to be able to effectively and safely have this kind of scene. There are home invasion kinks. They can be extremely hot. However, if somebody sees you breaking into somebody else's house, there's really not a good way to go, oh, well, it was actually a sex thing, and not have the cops arrest you anyway. Like, you're going to have to explain to a judge what your CNC kink is, and it'll be really weird for everybody.
Surprisingly, that has happened a lot in the legal system.
Yes, I write about it quite often.
It's become kind of all right. We accept
Every
that's the thing, and then they don't
nightmare.
really talk about it. But
You may not want to explain to your doctor about how you were trying out a scene from a book and getting fucked by a knife hilt.
Yeah, please don't do that, guys. Also, there's a lot of things that I've read where people like fantasize about being fucked with a gun. Do not do that. If you have to be told not to do that, you should not be engaging in any play with weapons. If I have to tell you that you should not be putting a gun inside of you for sexual pleasure, then you should not be playing with any of these things in the bedroom.
They make gun-shaped dildos. Don't use an actual fucking weapon.
Yeah, like I have actually heard this one a lot too, where somebody has like been like, "Oh, I'd be super into like fucking you with the end of my gun." I'm like, no.
They make knife-shaped dildos, things that are meant to go inside of you.
Yes, and this is also a media thing. I think this is specifically hentai that I've seen a lot of that is like fucking people with weapons. I don't think I've seen a lot of actual porn of that, but like hentai I have seen, and I think that that's where that comes from.
Police batons. Getting fucked by a police baton.
I've seen that a lot in porn. Yeah, but like I've seen like gun sex a lot, but only in porn that I've seen that. I don't know. I see that portrayed every so often, but I feel like if you have to be told you should not be shoving a gun inside of yourself, that you probably just should not be allowed to have sex. Like, just don't do it. Like, please stop. If you actually think that you should be shoving a gun inside of yourself, please go back to sex ed and start over. Do not.
I don't know. You guys are looking at different places than I am. I don't know that I've seen a lot of it.
I I have seen some things like we all know. Just I am mouse of the cursed browser history. I Google things before I think about the ramifications to my algorithm.
I listen to bad audiobooks on YouTube, which is not okay. Another thing for everybody over 18, you can get a lot of smut books on YouTube, oddly enough, audiobooks. They don't go through those at all. So it's always a surprise when I click on one. Most of the time it's just a weird little rom-com. But tons of bad ones on there too.
Yeah, I have seen some really, really bad smut all over the internet. And I am not really big into smut, but like I will sometimes listen to it if I've been told it was good and just give it a good shot. Like I'm into reading. I like it. Sometimes I don't really have the energy or time to read, so I'll listen to a podcast or an audiobook. And sometimes I'm just like, why the fuck did somebody must have been fucking with me? There's no way they actually thought this was good. But like then I find out book talk is like the biggest perpetrator of this to me. Like somebody will like suggest a book to me that they found on book talk and I won't realize it was from book talk until I look into it later. Like how the fuck was this even suggested?
Monster fucking, very popular on book talk.
Yes.
They normalize it a ton.
That's why Mouse is on it. Okay.
No, not me. I am not on book talk. I actually kind of want to fight half the people who are perpetrating the crimes against humanity of making those book talk books famous. Like right now, I would like to actually fight some of the people who are actually getting these books famous. Because like whoever actually like started pushing Haunting Adeline forward, we have beef, and I hope you know that.
Honestly, though. Haunting Adelaide, I read it because I saw it on book talk, to be honest. And it was just horror story after horror story. And again, watching the train crash.
It was suggested to me, and I was like, okay, yep. I guess like it'll be at least funny reading. Cause like I knew it was probably bad smut, but I didn't realize how bad.
Now my bad smut recommendations are usually orc based.
That does make sense. Monster fucking just because Will just needs another monster fucker in his life. Poor Will.
Life is hard.
What is it? The Strider from Baldur's Gate?
Oh gosh. Will's not okay. Like I don't know if you guys can hear this, but he sounds very upset.
There was a meme going around recently where this woman on Facebook is playing through Baldur's Gate. Not even a meme. I remember. I think she posted it herself. And but her sister has never played, and so she was sending pictures of the characters to her sister. And her sister had to guess the names of the characters and the personalities. And like she was getting them pretty good. And then she sent a picture of the illithid that you can fuck in that one scene. And the sister's like, tell me, did you fuck this creature? She's like, yeah, I did. I may have fucked that creature.
Absolutely did. Damn right. Also did the demon.
Yeah. I have not played the game personally, but I feel like I would live a very unholy life in that game.
Absolutely.
Oh, you definitely would. That would be chaos.
Look, my entire life is chaos. Give me the power to like be in an MMO doing random shit, and I guarantee nobody's safe.
The Sims. Completely unhinged.
No, that sounds like my kind of fun.
Yeah, I could see it.
Like we should not be allowed to talk about kink and media because people just go off on all these tangents. That's exactly what we did. Just tangent after tangent.
We never even talked about kink in video games.
Oh yeah,
we just got to Baldur's Gate, which I think is big ones.
There's some big ones though. Scorn. Is it Scorn or?
Not Final Fantasy 14. You know how big the kink community is in Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah,
there's entire Arrow RP servers that are just like entirely.
I have seen a disproportionate amount of hentai made about Final Fantasy characters in kink.
Oh yeah, that one bunny archer girl. I don't remember her name. Freya, something like.
I don't remember. Like she's in like a ton of like random BDSM porn though. Which I've always found very interesting because like I've never actually played Final Fantasy, so I like had no idea who she was, and I had to have it explained to me who the fuck it was.
Yep.
Like who is this? Why do they keep showing up? Oh, it's a Final Fantasy thing, and I'm just like, I thought that was a kid's game. Okay.
Well, it's our generation grew up with, Tifa and Aerith, and that just became like
Tifa porn is also super common, by the way. And I see this a lot because, as you know, I go on quests for like the worst fucking hentai I can find, and I end up really, really in some weird places.
And there's a lot of that around, to be sure.
Yeah. One of the things about being a kink admin is that in order to make content, you try to find stuff that other people don't post very much. So you have to go on these really deep dives that absolutely destroy your algorithm to try to find things. And let me tell you, I have seen some really weird shit. And I've shared some of it with Will and Drow in specific. It's a lot. My algorithm will never recover.
I mean, my algorithm just shows me a lot of Creed and Nickelback memes.
That seems on brand for you, honestly.
I don't know how to respond to that. I think that's a little rude.
I mean, if the shoe fits.
Arms wide open.
I was about to say, is this how I remind you?
Graham.
Yes. Oh yeah. I can't get away with it. I can't get away from it.
No.
It's just.
Do you want to be a big rock star?
Every time we post a new meme in our private chat, we're just kind of to say, "Hey, Will, look at this photograph."
Yes.
It will never end, Will.
That's so rude.
Have you met me? You know exactly what to expect. Be real.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
You invited me to be on this podcast because I am a bratty fucking brat. Like, you knew.
You're not wrong.
Mm-hmm. Seldom am.
Now.
Gaslighter.
Now. I've never gaslit anyone.
Finally found it. I've been searching this whole time, guys. There's a game called Lust for Darkness and Lust from Beyond. If you want to get mad at a game, Mouse, just do some basic looking into that game. It basically is trying to Lovecraftian kink.
See, I was already getting mad at the names because they just sound terrible.
Yeah, it's basically cultified kink.
Look, we're not saying cults aren't hot. Like, everyone's got their things. Cults could be pretty hot, yeah. But, like, I was about to say don't make it weird, but I feel like that would, like, really kind of take away the point of a lot of things.
Into monsters. So what you're saying is that we need to start a cult that's about summoning monsters.
Look, I may or may not already have the cult of the Church of Dumb Slut that I am very proud of. I think I have already informed you about the Church of Dumb Slut on several occasions. I'm pretty sure there's actually clips on YouTube of me talking about it in other podcasts or in other episodes of this podcast. I'm pretty sure that's the one where I was talking about being a dumb slut and I was losing my shit because that was just what the AI chose to portray me as. Is let me talk for 30 seconds about being a dumb slut on this podcast, and then YouTube memorialize it forever.
Yeah.
Thank you, YouTube. Appreciated.
Oh,
I lost my shit. It happened. Oh, that was so fucking bad. It was hilarious though. It's a great way to advertise what the unhinged podcast is.
Yeah, they really do. They've only done up to like episode 9 or 10.
Yeah, and some of the things that it chose to or the AI picked out were things that like I completely forgot that I said, but as I listened, I was like, no, that's 100% something I would say too. Yep. Like I have no beef with that. Like I'm sure I did say that. I have no recollection of why I did, but that sounds right.
All right, so it has been quite some time. What are we talking about next episode?
We had suggested other ideas at the end of the last episode, I think, and I forget what they were.
As usual.
Do we want to talk about like responsible social media in kink, like how to actually make sure that you are running your social media in a way that is safe and responsible as a practitioner of BDSM? because I think that would be an interesting topic as somebody who actually does run a page. Like what I prioritize when I'm talking about BDSM online.
That's fine with me. Works for me. I don't got anything else.
Like, I'm not sure if we want to combine that with something else either, but like I've personally, we were talking about that Whips and Change page that I really dislike the way they represent BDSM online and how it's irresponsible.
Yep.
And since we were just talking about media today, I think it would be nice to talk about like how to do it in a way that would actually be beneficial.
I think we had talked a bit about that before too, because like how I feel about King Talk is kind of mixed feelings because there isn't really any age restrictions to get to that.
Yes. I also have the same thing about like BDSM on Facebook. Like there's only so much you can do to keep minors from finding your page on Facebook, because you can change it so like only 18 plus can see your page. But as we all know, it's really not that hard to change a button to change your age on Facebook, is it? Then we did the same thing for porn as millennials. So like, I don't know why people think that, it's going to keep minors from finding your page.
And especially growing
it's not
up,
going to.
It's so easy. If you don't have a parent actually watching out for things like that or checking information like that, it was so easy for me to be doing the stuff I shouldn't have been doing.
Oh yeah, like I am really surprised I, managed to escape most of my childhood unscathed, because I was in some really, really suspicious chat rooms. Because I had very, very little monitoring online, because nobody, I was very
online role play and things like that.
Oh, I was. Oof.
You ever watch the static? You ever watch the porn channel through the static?
I have seen some things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's really important, especially if you are like myself or other admin that I think do listen to this podcast, where you are a member of this community that is talking about kink online. We do have a responsibility to do so in a way that is not harmful. And I think that it is important to talk about the age of the people who can see your content, but also what you're actually presenting. Like, yes, you can talk about like things that you've tried, but like you should also do so in a way that is making it clear that this is something that you can't do lightly. Please do not engage in BDSM just because it sounds like fun. Do your research first.
I think it might be good to talk about with that episode too, just responsibilities in general, because like there was tons of stuff I shouldn't have been watching as a kid that my parent did the old cover your eyes type moment.
You know what also would be nice
like
to talk about BDSM around children in general.
Yep.
There are a lot of people who are into BDSM who use social media and have young children where they have to like kind of, eventually you're going to have to explain to your kids why mommy and daddy have this like giant cross in their bedroom. Like, how do you suggest that? Yeah. Prim in my server, Primal Caregiver Daddy, he actually had his kids around him while he was sitting in voice chat one day. And his daughter, who could not actually hear any of our conversations, walked up and said, is it a kink to kink shame somebody? And the entire server was like, the fuck? And he said to his daughter, well, what do you think a kink is? And she said, I don't know. Is it a hobby or something? And we lost our fucking minds entirely. Because I mean, she's not wrong.
No,
technically,
not wrong
she's
at all.
right. It's definitely a type of hobby. But like, if you're open to talking about these things with your kids, they're less likely to get grossed out. Or I mean, they'll probably still get grossed out about it, but like, they're less likely to like be curious about it. And
they lose the cool factor of it.
Yeah, like if it's something that they're understanding, it's like your parents having sex. Like, it happens. You don't want to have to think about it. But also, it's better that you know what it is than you think mommy's hurting daddy. Or daddy's hurting mommy.
Exactly.
It's better to have the conversation than to not. So like, it's really nice to have like conversations about how to handle kink when you do have young children who will eventually ask questions. Like, I think that'd be good, like responsible navigation of kink online and around children, where children may see it and be involved.
Yeah. We can talk about that. That's good with me.
Okay. I think that'd be a great one.
That'll be the next episode. So I hope you enjoyed listening. You should know, hopefully by now, where you guys can catch us. It's Google Starbright Podcast. You find all the links and all the necessary information below if you'd like to join us live or just find out more. And see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.